Hello, everyone. I wanted to talk about a very specific subject that no one really likes talking about, and I know the reasons why they don't like talking about it, but let me first give you an example of what everyone is talking about and why I want to talk about something a little different. Recently, SunnyV2 released a video discussing Chris, friend of Mr. Beast. Now, Chris has recently been going through a transition. Chris identifies as trans. And SunnyV2's video basically was making the claim that due to this transition, Chris was going to be some kind of PR nightmare for Mr. Beast's brand. Now, I'm not going to get into the transphobia of this. Better educated people on that subject than I have already spoken at length about that. What I wanted to talk about is the deliberate dehumanization there, and how widespread and common such dehumanization really is that we just don't talk about. Because, quite honestly, we're all guilty of it. I've dehumanized other people online, so have you. And so have all of the people on YouTube, Twitter, etc. Everyone's done it. Often without necessarily meaning to. Habitual dehumanization, which I see as the major problem here. The best example, and I guess the straight-up most enmasked example, would be Twitter. Why Twitter? Why is Twitter such a mecca of dehumanization? Well, it's very easy. You see, on Twitter, you have a couple of unique problems with Twitter as a platform that make it very easy for your threshold to dehumanize the other side is very low. First off, when you read a tweet on Twitter, it's just that tweet, it's just the words, and a profile pic that is almost never a real person's face. It's a brand logo. It's a fictional character. It's someone's favorite food. It's whatever, right? There's no human face on that, so we're not making that immediate conscious connection that, hey, there is another person on the other side of this tweet, nor are we making the unconscious or the subconscious connection that there is another person on the other side of that tweet. Instead, we see the tweet, and if we disagree with the tweet strongly enough, boom, you are a troll, you're a moron, you're a villain, right? Now, a lot of what people say doesn't look dehumanizing on the surface. For example, say you accuse somebody of a heinous crime. I'm actually going to provide a really interesting example where conservatives really like to accuse liberals of being child groomers, right? Very common accusation thrown at liberals in general on Twitter. This is a deliberate, obviously, insult, but it is dehumanizing in the way where you are essentially putting forth the idea that this particular side or this particular person, depending on how broad the Twitter war is, right, is this level of evil, and everyone's level of evil is different depending on what your moral compass is, but a lot of people agree that child grooming is a level of what broadly could be defined as inhumanly evil. Now, if you think that's an exaggeration, let me ask you what your opinion is of Jeffrey Epstein and his actions. You've probably self-answered that, and you now realize what that accusation that the conservatives fling at liberals willy-nilly actually means. Okay? That's the kind of evil that they're implying here. That it is they're child groomers and therefore they're so evil they're not even human. Right? Now, another really interesting example is very specific ways of attacking someone. I'm going to give a really interesting example here. For Creator Clash 2, an event organized by iDubbbz and I believe it's his, they're married now, his wife Anissa. I could be wrong. If I am, Please correct me. I'm not 100% sure if they're married or not. I keep hearing different terms for that. Girlfriend, wife, I don't know. Anyways, back to the point. iDubbbz and his, I guess the safe term here would be partner, are setting up Creator Clash 2, and they had a creator on the docket named Froggy Fresh. Well, during the usual pre-boxing fight banter to drum up interest and create drama and everything like that, the whole fake drama thing, Froggy Fresh cracked some jokes that Anissa's mother didn't like. She called him an imp. Alright? Now, as funny as that sounds, once you realize what an imp actually is, which is basically, at least in popular culture, it is a small, mischievous little devil thing. And considering she was upset at him and was not trying to make a joke at him, that is an attempt at dehumanization. Okay? It may not seem like it at first glance, but when you break down the intention of her response, you actually know what an imp is, and you understand that she is coming from a place of anger and not humor. Like, if I called somebody a smelly old fart bag, and I'm obviously joking, that's different, right? That's, haha, fun times with the boys. But this was a person who was aggrieved and intended to antagonize Froggy Fresh here. That's habitual, alright? Did she fully intend to dehumanize him? Probably not fully. I would expect, given the context, that it was probably partially intended, because we're just so ingrained in that being our instant response, at least on Twitter. But that is by no means the only level of dehumanization, which is kind of middle-of-the-road dehumanization. It's specific insults designed to kind of remove the humanity from somebody. Not too dissimilar to a lot of the rhetoric used both in history and in modern day. I referenced earlier, conservatives throwing the term child groomer at liberals. This is something the Proud Boys do quite often with the trans and the drag communities. I am sure in order for China to throw the Uyghur Muslims into camps and slowly eliminate them, they had to do something similar with their populace to dehumanize the Uyghur Muslims and justify this response, right? Following in the same train as Germany pre-World War II. And post-World War II as well. Well, mid-World War II, I guess I should say. Post-World War II kind of solved the problem in terms of that group. But, moving on. This is a large part of the actual reason why extensive consumption of porn is a problem. Now, a lot of these, black pill, red pill type content creators, a lot of them claim porn is bad because, you're gonna get stuck and addicted to it, and you're never gonna find a girl. They are completely avoiding the real problem with porn and porn addiction. You see, porn itself is inherently dehumanizing because, frankly, sex sells. And porn is simply taking usually a pair of attractive people, sometimes it's more, sometimes it's single, and reducing them down to just their sexual and physical appearance aspects, right? You're removing thoughts, personality, humanity. You're removing a lot of the humanity. And this is a relatively lower level version of dehumanization because there is some of the humanity left, namely the physical appearance and the sexual part of that person's identity, whatever that happens to be. But this is also why it's so common for, even on other video platforms, for women to become objectified. You see, porn is reducing mostly women, to some extent men as well, but of course men are the predominant consumers of porn. It's reducing both sides down to just the sexual components, but because the overwhelming majority is men, men then get into the habit of seeing women in purely the physical appearance and the sexual aspects. And this is the real problem with porn addiction or high levels of porn consumption. Now, this didn't used to be a problem back in the day. You're actually making the connection probably at this point that a lot of these are because of the sort of ease of consumption of these. How many children are on Twitter, right? By children, according to Twitter's policy the last time I checked, 12 and up, right? Or it's 14 and up now, I can't quite remember. I'm not on Twitter. I have a Twitter, I'm just never on it. But children can go on Twitter, and children are developing these habits early. They're developing a habit on Twitter of seeing text and not connecting that text to another real human being on the other side, and that'll extend to any other platform in which there is no visible human face. They are able to find porn at a younger age online because, of course, the age gating on most porn sites is pathetically bad. Are you older than 18? Of course I'm older than 18. Right? It's just one click. One little lie. Boom, of course I'm 18. Right? Because let's be really honest. That "are you over 18" question does not prevent children from watching porn. And I think a lot of parents would be shocked to know that their teenager under the age of 18 is probably watching porn sometimes. It's pretty much an open secret that nobody likes talking about, but that's a subject I'll get into more detail in a separate episode. Right now, I just want to acknowledge the fact that children can easily access porn and probably do in large amounts, and thus they are breaking down their own other people, usually women, not always, but usually, into just the physical appearance and sexual aspects, removing thereby a large amount of the humanity and primarily dehumanizing that person. Alright, now what makes this even more difficult is the presence of bots. Twitter is full of them, YouTube has some, right? Good old-fashioned bots. A bot could be programmed to say something particularly egregiously out of pocket. People get upset. They sling the most horrific things to this bot. The bot doesn't care. There's no real person on the other end of that. But the people don't know that. And then they just keep on going and going and going. And at the end of the day, I can say as much as I like, well, when you type a response to somebody's tweet, keep in mind there might be another person on the end of that. I can't guarantee that that isn't a bot, and neither can you. And with the advent of AI technology, this is going to get worse, where you're not even going to be able to tell, even if they do have a face, if they are going to be a real person, because AI is becoming better and better at faking human faces, faking human speech in text form. In fact, there already are AIs that are writing tweets and posting them right now. Now, they are publicly known as bots. Very true. But wait until... sorry, puberty just hit, apparently. Wait until AI bots develop to the point where they can mimic a person's tweeting style exactly, and boom. Now you're not going to be able to tell at first glance if a tweet is made by a bot or not, and it's going to become an assumption that it isn't, and then you can say some really horrendous things to a real human other person. A great example of this is a comment chain. I do not remember where I saw this from. I apologize for not having a source. I cannot remember. I used to have it saved, but I accidentally deleted it when I was clearing out my phone. At the beginning of this year, actually. Anyways, but I had seen this comment chain where somebody had an argument with somebody on Reddit, and some really horrific things were stated in that comment chain, and like a few months later, one of the people PM'd the other one and said, hey, are you really going to do whatever? Because, of course, there were various threats being made, and the other person was like, oh, heavens no. That was just something I said in the heat of the moment. And some of the stuff that was said in the heat of the moment by both sides, I'm not making any one side here look innocent. They both did it. It's just a habit. They didn't even realize until after they'd gone back and checked that they'd said some really horrendous things, right? And, of course, this continues right on through other forms of contact that don't involve a human face. YouTube comments, forum posts, right? The only real reason forum posts aren't as bad is because a lot of the times when you join a forum, that forum has a focus on a particular subject, and a lot of the members on that forum are coming together as specifically either fans of that subject or interested in that subject at the very least. So you have that. But this is also why on Twitch you see a lot more misogyny than anywhere else, is because you're looking at, once again, coming off the porn, some of those people on Twitch are inherently going to have picked up this habit of reducing women to their sexual and physical appearance components, and not even contemplating the rest, not contemplating their intelligence or their personality, their thoughts, their feelings, any of that, right? And again, this does also happen to men, just to a much lesser extent. But what's particularly interesting to watch is when people get upset at a VTuber, because unlike with other Twitch streamers, who in most cases do have their face on camera, you can see the emotion on their face, you can hear the emotion in their voice whenever something happens. This isn't quite true for VTubers. You can hear the emotion in their voice because it is their real voice, usually, sometimes, but then they might be pitching their voice. But whether or not they're pitching their voice, they are definitely not visually represented by their actual face. They are visually represented by some kind of character, usually an anime one. OC anime character, whatever, but not always. Regardless, it's not the real human face there. It's really interesting to go back and look at the Hogwarts Legacy debacle, and while real human presenting Twitch streamers, as I'll call them, did get a lot of hate and vitriol from lunatics, decrying them playing Hogwarts Legacy, the actual worst of it was directed at VTubers, to the point where 2 of them quit streaming. At least 2 that I know of. Alright? You didn't see any streamers quitting that had their real faces in camera. Because while they did receive a lot of shit, and a lot of that was dehumanizing if you go back and read it, calling them, all kinds of horrific things, the VTubers got the absolute worst of it. And I want to also make it very clear where dehumanization is not just insulting someone egregiously badly, right? We are talking about people deliberately saying things that imply directly that you are not human, you are somehow less than human. Again, I go back to the first example, which is why I brought that up in the first place. While SunnyV2 said a lot of insulting things to Chris, it wasn't very specifically the comparison or the implication that Chris is just a LGBTQ character that deliberately and specifically dehumanizes him, okay? SunnyV2 says a lot of things in that video, but that specific sentence, and a couple of other ones, but that one is the standout that is most obviously dehumanizing and very deliberately chosen, okay? Things like that. The imp comment to Froggy Fresh, that was very deliberately meant to belittle him and to take away, to some extent, intentionally or otherwise, his humanity. She was implying, again, intentionally or accidentally, I'm not sure, but she was implying he was less than human in that moment. And we do this all the time. You might think this sounds ubiquitous. Oh, I see that kind of thing all the time. That is exactly my point. You see it in online discourse. all the time, because for the collective internet community, it is become a habit to do so, to attack someone's humanity, because if you can make them seem inhuman in some way, you can get more people on your side. Okay? That is the overarching problem, and this is one of the really bigger concerns I have with AI, by the way. There are a couple of other concerns I have with AI, but this is my biggest one, that AI will become so good at faking humanity that people will begin to disbelieve actual humanity, and levels of empathy will go down even further. Alright? It's something no one's talking about. Again, when in the context of the Sunny V2 video, some of the people covering that video did mention this in passing, little realizing that they are equally as guilty of that, but on an unintentional level. Right? Now, I'm not defending Sunny V2 here. In my opinion, his video on Chris is both gross and unnecessary. It was, in my opinion, probably intended to create this kind of controversy to bring more eyes to his channel. I think this was baiting. Alright? I think he was baiting controversy for attention, is my opinion. Does he believe at least some of what he says in that video? Sure. Do I think he's transphobic? Sure. But again, other people have covered that, and I'm not going to. I just want to focus on his dehumanization and how that has become a habit in the online collective. Across the board. Now, on one final note, there's obviously more examples. Political discourse is fond of doing this deliberately, of course. Specifically, political discourse between non-politicians talking politics. Never trust anything a politician says anyways, but that's beside the point. Anyways, brief moment aside, it's also a huge reason why a lot of streamers and YouTubers either start out or quickly move to show their face on camera. In fact, I think this is part of the reason why Dream eventually decided to show his face on camera, because you see, Dream had become quite the controversial figure, and he, like me currently, just used his voice. His face did not appear in camera, no one knew what he looked like, etc. And once he had the whole speedrunning scandal go down, people really piled onto him hard, and part of the reason why they piled onto him and said some pretty interestingly unique things is because his face wasn't visible. They weren't connecting with him on an empathetic level because, again, he's just a voice. And people don't connect to a voice as much as they connect to a voice and a face. I've had people mention that they really like my voice, and I appreciate that. And to some extent, you, the listener, can connect with me on that level. However, that connection is not going to run as deep as if I had a little face cam in the corner. Right? That would add a level of relatability. Your brain would make connections and would empathize with me more than you can or will with just my voice. Therefore, if I were to ever get into some kind of controversy, you would see people dive deeper into the well of dehumanization than you would for somebody whose face was on camera. This is not a complaint. This is not some kind of forewarning. I'm fairly emotionally durable. Does not bother me. I've had lots of horrific things said to me over the course of my life. I'm 30 for Pete's sakes. I've been around the block once. Possibly twice, depending on what your definition of a block is. But I've been around a little bit. And, yeah, not a lot bothers me, on an emotional level at least. An intellectual level is different. But emotionally, I'm extremely durable. So it's not a concern for me. It doesn't bother me. The threat of this doesn't bother me. But I'm using myself as an example here, mostly because for once I actually can. But I am going to be easier to dehumanize than somebody who uses a face cam. Okay? And a lot of people are really fond of saying things like, oh, you wouldn't dare say that to my face. Well, yeah, but not necessarily because they're afraid of you. A great example is Sneeko. Sneeko is really fond of saying to other people who criticize him, well, you wouldn't say that to my face. Yeah, because if they're face to face with you, it's easier to connect with you on an emotional level. Right? Now, keep in mind that Sneeko uses his face on cam, and while there are some liberal pundits who absolutely went the dehumanization route, for the most part, most people, quite appropriately, called him a moron, and pretty much left it at that. And calling someone a moron, incidentally, is not dehumanizing because you can be a stupid human and still be human, you know what I mean? You're just a stupid one, right? So, insulting someone's intelligence doesn't actually dehumanize them. It's an attempt to discredit their argument, obviously. You're an idiot, what would you know, right? But it's not dehumanizing. Imp is, as going back to that example, calling someone a character is, if it's said in a specific way. For example, some people have accused Sneeko of playing an alpha male character because it's so incongruous with his messaging before he really jumped onto the Tate bandwagon. And that is a valid point. If you look at Sneeko pre-Tate and you look at Sneeko post-Tate, he does behave totally differently. So the accusation that he is playing a character is a valid criticism. However, in the case of Sunny V2's comments in terms of Chris, he's calling Chris an LGBTQ character and implying that this whole transition that Chris is doing is to create a trans character in the Mr. Beast brand, I guess, which implies that Chris has no autonomy of his own there, right? Sneeko chose to become, according to the Sneeko as a character theory, Sneeko chose to go down this route. That was a deliberate decision. The implication from Sunny V2 is that Chris did not go down this route. He is simply a character being played for the brand, which again removes Chris's decision, his intelligence, his own thought process. Right? That's the difference there. It is a subtle difference, but one is dehumanizing in terms of its context and intention. The other one is a criticism based upon pre and post Sneeko. Now, some people will argue, well, there's Chris before whatever point, and then there's Chris now who is transitioning. But Chris before was unhappy, and had said so, right? Sneeko before Tate was kind of unhappy and had some problems, but especially when you consider the fact that he's walked back some of the things he said during his most extreme post-Tate phase, you can see where some of what he was saying was to gain a specific following and gain a specific kind of attention. All right. There's insulting someone by calling them an imp for fun, and then there's calling someone an imp because you're mad at them and you're trying to make them seem inhuman. Again, I'm not necessarily sure that Anis's mother was specifically intending to dehumanize him, but the implication there is dehumanizing. But that's very common in online discourse. So that's what I really wanted to focus on, because as important as trans rights are to just plain old purposes of equality, I think the online collectives' now habitual dehumanization of each other, best exemplified by Sunny V2's deliberate choice to dehumanize Chris, is a slightly larger problem. And just to kind of make things clear, I am not saying that trans rights are not important, nor am I saying that there isn't a problem there. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that dehumanizing people has become a habit for the online collective at large. And, of course, trans people Actually, hell, anyone, really. Everyone's been a victim of dehumanization at some point in their lives, regardless of their origins, their identity, or whatever. I have been dehumanized simply because I am white. It sounds odd, but my opinion has been discounted based on that fact, and you can see such things stated, and that happens to me a lot less than, say, minorities, right, in America. My opinion being discounted because I am white happens far less than somebody else's opinion being discounted because they're black, or something else, right? I'm just saying it can and does happen to everyone, regardless of origins. That's the point I'm making there. Don't pity me, I'm doing fairly well for myself in life right now. But at the end of the day, it's not something unique to any one group. Some groups, again, are obviously more often the target of dehumanizing tactics, but it happens to everyone. And it is a larger scale problem than anyone's willing to confront because, again, frankly, everyone does it, often unintentionally. I know I have, and I am 100% sure you, the listener, has as well. Again, probably not intending to, but the language we use, the way we use it, and the intention behind it is a combination people don't often think about in the heat of the moment. We're all guilty, and that's why no one wants to talk about it, because everyone else is just as guilty as everyone else is. At the end of the day, that's what I wanted to talk about, more to get it on the public record than anything else. Sunny V2's video is gross, like I said before. It is transphobic, but it is also highlighting a larger scale problem that no one really has gone in depth on. So with that food for thought, thank you very much for listening to me, and have a great 24 hours.